That's the whole point about nuclear weapons. They're about deterrence, and deterrence is about uncertainty.
The pace of Ukraine's progress on the battlefield in the last few days has taken many by surprise, including, it would seem, the Russians themselves. Can the Ukrainian momentum be maintained? And how will Russia respond? Let's speak to Major General Rupert Jones, former standing Joint Force Commander, and Katia Glod, the non-resident fellow at SKEPA's Russia programme. And let's start with you, Rupert Jones, if we may. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is this possible that there is a momentum behind Ukraine? The weapons, the high-tech weapons have been provided by the West. They've arrived. Can you see a sort of snowball type effect here that they can push Russia all the way through the Donbass region and out of their country entirely?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say is the Ukrainians have surprised us time and again with their resilience, with their courage, with their fighting prowess. So, you know, anything is possible. And your analogy of a snowball is, I mean, actually was used by a Ukrainian official and is a really apt one. You know, so in war, if you build momentum, if the floodgates open and the waters flow, it's very, very difficult to stop. And that's what they've managed up in the north. And so they need to be careful they don't overextend themselves. But it's very hard for the Russians to fall back, create new defensive lines, and, if you like, reset, both to stop the Ukrainians tactically, but also regain the momentum, both at a tactical but also strategic level, because, of course, President Putin is also under great pressure in Moscow as well.
And that's an interesting question. Has this war over the last few months demonstrated the questionable status of Russia's army, its sort of superpower status that, you know, the Cold War was always very theoretical, largely speaking, because we never had a hot war. And now we've seen Russia. Is there something to be learned there about their incapability in some respects?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, a war teaches us a great deal about our adversaries. So those of us who've been studying, you know, the Russian military over, call it the last kind of 10 years, either recent period, I don't think we overestimated them. We were clear that their front end forces were good and capable and had some sophisticated techniques. But we also clear-eyed that the kind of what sat behind it, the mass of the Russian military, was less capable, less well-trained, less good logistics, unreliable equipment. But all of that said, I think we've all been surprised by the degree to which the Russian military has fallen short, to the degree that it has.
And does that lead us to another concern? We spoke a bit about this yesterday, and actually we spoke to two different former British Army people who had opposing views. Could you see Putin having to take a drastic step? That drastic step might involve a tactical nuclear weapon of some sort or other. I've heard entirely opposing views on this subject. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? There will be opposing views, because anyone who speaks with absolute certainty about these things is delusional. You know, that's the thing about war. You know, it's a contest, and we can't be sure what's going to happen. I think it's not unreasonable to conclude that Putin, as he's under greater and greater pressure, has got to do something. And the things he has done so far have not worked. He demonstrated he couldn't do big maneuver warfare. He's tried to use a lot of firepower, and that hasn't worked. So what does he do? What does he do next? A general mobilization probably isn't effective because he can't train and equip the forces he needs. So his options are relatively limited. One option is to just double down on using conventional firepower, and that is something to fear, certainly. The alternative is, as you suggest, is to use tactical nuclear weapons. For my money, that is a relatively unlikely option, but I certainly wouldn't discount it. Why relatively unlikely? I don't know where it takes him. I'm not sure what it adds up to. And he's no fool. For all the things he's done, he's no fool. He knows the implications of using tactical nuclear weapons. It is a massive threshold to cross. And he would have to assume that NATO would respond militarily. And boy, oh boy, he's not in a position to respond against NATO.
But is that true, though? Because one of the lessons of the last few months are that NATO is very, very cautious about responding with direct military response. Are you saying that you believe that if there was a tactical military strike in Ukraine, a non-NATO country, the NATO countries would respond with direct military action?
So again, no absolutes.
No.
But for me, a line will have been crossed. I think NATO have played a very smart game over the months in terms of how they've built up their support to Ukraine very, very carefully, as you say. Article 5 has not been enacted. The use of a tactical nuclear weapon, I think NATO nations would find it very hard not to turn a dial up a notch very significantly. And even if the whole of NATO didn't, would the United States stand by? I don't know. Much to debate, but Putin won't know that either. That's the whole point about nuclear weapons. They're about deterrence, and deterrence is about uncertainty.
Commander Rupert, we talked about Putin in Ukraine, but you were a soldier. Your father was a famous soldier. Did you come across the Queen in your duties? Do you have any reflections on her?
Yes, as you know, the Queen, the royal family have a very, very close relationship with the military. Indeed, we swear an oath of allegiance to our monarch. And so I had the great privilege, like so many in the military, to meet her over the years. Actually, my strongest memories are from before I joined the army. You mentioned my father, who was awarded a Victoria Cross in the Falklands War. And I remember well with my mother and my brother going to Buckingham Palace to receive his Victoria Cross, and you receive it in one of the private rooms when it's a posthumous award. And we sort of stood there waiting for the Queen to come in, and the doors open, and in she came, and she presented the medal. And of course, she hadn't presented many Victoria Crosses in her reign. Yeah. And I always remember she talked about she'd been presented once upon a time a piece of the Crimean cannon, because the Victoria Cross is cut from a Crimean War cannon. And she'd been presented with a small piece of the metal, and we all had this image of her rifling through her drawers, trying to find the bit of metal to show to us. But it was a lovely memory and a great privilege to receive the medal from her.
And a horribly bittersweet moment for your family. But did you have a sense of humanity there with how she dealt with it?
Oh, very much so. I was 13, my brother was 16. We'd been cast into the spotlight, and she just kind of made us feel very, very at ease. The other thing I remember is asking my brother and me whether like all brothers, we fought all the time. So had that wonderful touch to make you feel special and relaxed.
Well, it's a lovely story. I'm glad we asked you about it. Rupert, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
That's Major General Rupert Jones, former Standing Joint Force Commander.